You are listening to Three Kitchens Podcast, hosted by Aaron Walker and Heather Dyer.
We're friends trying out recipes in our own regular home kitchens. We hope our experiences will inspire you to get creative in the kitchen.
Well, hello and welcome to Three Kitchens Podcast. I'm Erin Walker, and along with Heather Dyer, we are introducing a new format of episode to our show today. So, starting this season, we will be inviting other creators to act as a guest host of the show so that we can hear new stories, get new recipes, and share them all with you, our listeners. So with that, please join us in giving a warm welcome to our guest, Megan Gaul. Welcome, Megan.
Thanks so much, Erin. Thanks, Heather. I'm glad to be here. You guys have a wonderful rapport and just a great mission. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh,
Excellent.
thank you. Thanks for being we were just talking about how you're kind of the guinea pig because you're the first of our guest hosts. So this is fun, and thank you for agreeing to it, even though we'll probably have to kind of figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fun part. I mean, you get in, you get messy, you figure it out, and you get slightly better next time. Or it could be great the first time, who knows?
Let's go with that. Let's just assume.
Yeah, so just to briefly introduce, Megan is a health and wellness coach from New York City and the creator behind Partake Meal Planning and Wellness. So I'm going to throw this over to you, Megan. Can you tell us all about what Partake is?
Absolutely. So I help folks who have a weight loss goal, but they want to do it their way. They want to do it like self-compassionately, calmly, with logic, with rational thinking, and not with other people's rules. So we work one-on-one with each other to make that happen. And I've been doing that since late 2021. And I was really brought there because I had my own health journey. And along that journey, I learned how to love cooking. I wouldn't say I'm amazing at it, but it felt like such a wonderful way to express creativity, a wonderful way to bring fun foods into my life on purpose, that still made my health an important part of that. That's what Partake does. That's what I do through Partake. And that's kind of the connection I felt with you guys, because you guys are clearly passionate about food and just getting in the kitchen and having fun.
We're all about trying.
Yes.
When we started this, we were used to hearing professional chefs or trained chefs talking about food and talking about cooking, and not a lot of home cooks or self-taught people sharing information about their experiences in the kitchen, which we feel there's nothing wrong. I mean, we love listening to those chefs too, and you can learn a lot from them. But there's something to be said for the experience of someone who's like us, like someone who's in the same position, has the same type of kitchen, has the same type of access to ingredients, and kind of living in the same lifestyle and learning as you go, and kind of hearing those experiences and putting them into your own day-to-day life and your meals. That's what we hope we can bring to people and inspire people with. So I love that you're kind of doing that same thing.
Yeah, I think, and a lot of even the famous cooks, the people who are really into the technique, a lot of them come to a love of cooking through home cooking anyway, through people in their family who are home cooks. So, it all starts there.
Yeah, often like we hear it from our moms and our grandmas and
Yeah, it's often inspired by family.
Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. And that kind of, I thought that really tied into, I don't know, the recipe that I that I shared with you too before we hopped on today.
Yeah.
we asked you to send us a recipe in advance that we could try, and something that for whatever you choose it, for whatever reason you choose it, and then you're going to tell us why you chose it and what it means to you, and then we'll talk about the experience of making it. It's as simple as that. So why don't you tell us why you chose it? What is it and why'd you choose it?
Oh, I think it just reminds me of being a kid. I think as a kid growing up, we didn't have a lot of snack foods in the house that were what the other kids were having in their lunch boxes. I don't know, the Hostess cupcakes, the
Mm.
Gushers, those kinds of things felt like I could never have them. Um, and I don't know if other people had that. I'm sure a lot of people had that experience where in their house there wasn't the same amount of like those snack foods that other people had.
Hmm.
And so I got really hyper. I loved those really hyper sugary snack foods. They became like big in my mind, like very important, very, whenever they were at a birthday party, I zoomed right there. Um,
Mm.
but this recipe, it's a banana chocolate chunk coffee muffin. And my mom would make it for guests, for road trips when we had to take something, for a picnic lunch. And it was just as heightened in my head, but it was homemade, like home ingredients, like
Mm.
I don't know, it just reminded me that like there was that kind of fun in the house. Um, so I love this recipe because it was kind of rare also. It was just for kind of special occasions when people would come
Okay.
over. Yeah, so I would
Mm.
Yeah.
associate it with like companies coming, families coming. Um, it just felt like when you saw those muffins on the counter, like,
Mm.
okay, this is a fun time.
Mom's in the kitchen
Oh,
making something.
Yeah,
What's coming
exactly.
up?
Hmm.
yeah. I love that association and what you said about kind of those processed snacks. So I think I had that similar experience too. We had them occasionally, but most
Yeah.
of what we had regularly was homemade. Like a real snack was like a Rice Krispie square. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like that was like, oh, sugar. We didn't
Yeah.
get sugar cereal. We didn't get like, all those kinds of things. And do
Same.
you do you think that like when you're a kid and you kind of fixate on what you can't have because you think it's probably better, does that lead to some sort of like how does that translate to as an adult? Do we all move past that and or do we still kind of like associate and create bad habits?
This
Mm.
question, like I love it because I think it creates some common patterns with people, but also there's a variety in how you can react to it. So I think
Mhm.
for some people, they grow up without a ton of that kind of highly processed, hyper palatable food in the house, and maybe that makes them really appreciate the taste of like a wonderful fresh plum or like a
Mm.
beautiful fresh salad. And that person might go more towards like those foods feel more attractive to me in their adult life. But I think for the bigger percentage of people, it creates this very strong line between the good foods and the bad foods,
Mhm.
which makes when we have what we put air quotes around the bad foods, we feel a lot of guilt or this is not how I'm supposed to be behaving, or it creates this fixation on that food. And
Mhm.
that was the case for me. I kind of went in as soon as the reins were off, like late high school, college, I became a foodie in that I wanted to always have the most hyper palatable, delicious, processed stuff available at all times. So I think I feel like there's no right way to do that because you're always as a parent kind of
Mm.
you're kind of creating balance. You're trying to create balance for your child so that they can make those decisions when they get older in a way
Mhm.
that makes sense to them.
Mhm.
But I do think, I think in my case, I got really hyper focused on the fun, hyper palatable foods, but that made this particular recipe feel like a nice, calm, loving kind of balance between those things. It's sweet, it's got real butter, it's got real sugar, it's got
Mhm.
real chocolate in it. It's homemade, it has love in it. It's not, and it wasn't like a bad food. It wasn't, I'm putting quotes around bad. It,
Right.
it
Right.
you
Yeah.
have it and you don't feel like I'm morally wrong for enjoying this.
Yeah, you don't feel guilty for it. There are
Yeah.
there are some things we
Yeah.
eat that we do feel guilty about.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Like our children are just hitting their teens right now, but now that they kind of have their own cash and they head out to the store at lunch, sometimes they go for the good choices, but often it's like, hey, did you know I could buy a pack of donuts at the store for $6 and I get six donuts? Like,
It's like,
and I'm
oh,
like,
who ate all those
That's
donuts?
that's great.
now it's money freedom and food freedom all at the same time. It's
Yeah, it's a
but that as kids get older, that independence is good and it gives them a chance to like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I can choose. Every year they're getting more experience and seeing the short-term gain versus the long-term gain.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting to see them now.
Yeah, I want you to kind of give us like a rundown of the recipe specifically because so I made the recipe. I shared with Erin, and she was
Hmm.
just before you joined us, she was eating a muffin,
Oh, good.
and because I just made them on the weekend, and I said to her, "Oh, do you taste something in there that's a little different than your
Mm.
average like banana chocolate chip muffin?" She's like, no. And so but there is something in this that's a little different. So why don't you tell us about the recipe specifically?
Yeah, so they're muffins that to me the main definitive factor is like the outside is like a little darker and it gets that little crispy caramelizey
Yeah.
edge, which
Hmm.
I love. And it always stays moist because of the banana. I have overcooked them in the past, but in general, I try really hard to keep them in that moist spot. And it's made with the normal kind of creaming method with the butter and the sugar. And then you add that mashed banana and
An
coffee
egg?
mixture, espresso
Oh yeah.
coffee mixture. Um,
Mm.
then it gets mixed with the dry ingredients, and you can add. My mom always made it with walnuts, and then decided never to do that because my dad would always complain. He's like, I don't like nuts.
Oh.
So, and I always like the ones with dark chocolate better anyway. So you can have dark chocolate, walnuts, or both.
Yeah, I made it with both.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Mhm.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts? I've never really shared it with other people.
Oh, well, first of all, I really appreciate that it was a handwritten recipe card because that's just, I don't know, something about that just feels good
Hmm.
and like homey. And you can tell, like, if you take the time to write out a recipe and share it with someone
Mhm.
Yeah.
or stash it in your recipe box because you know you're going to be making it a lot means you really like it. That always says something, I think.
Hmm.
But it was the coffee in it that was a little bit different to me. I don't know about you, Erin, but had you ever made a muffin with coffee in it?
I've never made a muffin with coffee in it, and I've never made a muffin using butter. Often
Yeah.
it's oil. When you talked about creaming the butter and sugar together, I was like, oh, right. Like that's more like cake making than what I'm
Yeah.
normally accustomed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the oil and banana mixture is really common. Like I see a lot of, I think you're right. With muffins,
Yeah.
it's usually like banana and like an olive oil or a coconut oil or a vegetable oil. And
Yeah.
that makes sense because it keeps it really moist as well, the oil. Butter is a
Hmm.
little riskier, I feel like, because sometimes it can get dry if it's butter. But
Okay.
I think because of the banana, it keeps it nice and moist.
And
Yeah.
it was interesting too that you said the outside gets darker because I worried that like, I thought, oh, that was a bit too hot for my oven. Like maybe my oven was running hot because I thought, oh, they shouldn't be quite so dark, even though we really loved them and ate them up.
Hmm.
But I'm glad to hear that actually it wasn't a failing on my part. They were supposed to be like that.
No, they do. They look dark on the outside. And I think it's because for some reason, I don't know, they never stick. Like you kind of butter the tins if you want to, but for some reason I've never really had them stick. But there's something about the mixture that it gets it slightly darker. I don't know if it's the amount of sugar. Maybe it's more sugar than a normal muffin. I'm not sure. But it does always look a little darker, but it stays, hopefully for you guys, it also stayed moist in the middle.
Mm. Hmm.
Mm, absolutely. I feel like it was a treat also to have nuts in it because we so often have to make our baking nut free if we're because our kids are grabbing it and going wherever, and it just feels like you should keep it nut free. So I almost never bake with nuts. So I really enjoyed like when Heather said, "What's the different ingredient?" I was like, "The walnuts." And she was like, "No." But for me, that was like a change up because often everything's got to be nut free.
Elementary school, right? So we
We've
were
gotten in the
used to
habit
that.
of it.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some things that feel like a treat now. And I think for me, being mired in, I've been a health coach for a few years, so being mired in all the recipes around that,
Mm,
even though I'm a health coach with folks with weight loss, so that doesn't necessarily mean any food is off limits. I just tend to be around all these recipes that are like, we only use dates instead of real sugar. We only
mm,
use, yogurt instead of oil or butter. We use
Mm.
applesauce. We use stevia. We use monk fruit. Like I'm
Mm.
constantly around those recipes. So using something or making a recipe with the real thing, whether it's real walnuts, you don't have to avoid the nuts. You can have the nuts in this particular recipe. You can have the real butter, the real sugar. I don't know. It just feels nice when you have that ingredient you haven't really been enjoying in a while.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like when you were a kid, did your mom, like, was she kind of a health, I was going to say health nut. I mean that in the best way. Like, was she kind of like health conscious in that way that this was a treat because it had those ingredients?
I think that she was mostly, I think the whole family was generally, let's make our meals pretty darn healthy. Let's have a lot of vegetables in them. There was no rule of like, let's not have sugar, but like you guys, like, I think like a lot of moms in the 90s, there was a common thread of like the Weight Watchers snacks and the low calorie cookies and all that stuff, the sugar free and the fat free options for all
Hmm.
the salad dressing and the
Yeah,
greens and stuff.
yeah.
Those things were often in the house. So this did feel special because it was meant to go with the meal or like with the breakfast, but
Hmm.
it was this like delectable, I don't know, sugary, buttery muffin that had chocolate in it. So I would say it was special.
Yeah, they're like little cakes.
Yeah, little gems.
Yeah.
For me, that like a muff, I bake quick breads like year
Hmm.
round. It's the thing I like to have either a muffin or a slice of like a loaf in the kids' lunches every day because it is that treat. And also I feel better about it. Just like Erin takes it a step further and like bakes her own bread for like their sandwiches and stuff because she feels good about giving them baked bread and she's good at baking bread. I don't go that far.
The problem is that I like it. And I'm like, but if I have to buy the store bread, I'm always like, I
Not
would
I
like
very
this
good.
better on my bread.
Yes.
Because then you feel a little bit better about maybe do
Mm,
throw in the granola bar or the whatever store-bought,
yeah.
packaged thing because you've got that either the bread or the muffin or something good that you know what's in it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And the nice thing about quick breads too and muffins like this is that you could just like if you pack it right, you can freeze individual slices and keep them nice. And then they are just as stable. Like you can keep them just as
Hmm.
long as a granola bar. So you can almost stock your freezer. And then the excuse of, well, the granola bar is convenient, then that's not as strong
Hmm.
of a pull. You can do the same thing, but with your quick breads and your muffins. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ask your mom for this recipe? Like how did you acquire the recipe so that you could start making it yourself?
She is just happy to have anyone, she saves a lot of stuff. She's happy to have anyone, make use of anything she saves in the house. So she was always like, that muffin recipe, I would like it for my household. And she's like, here you go. So it was very easy. She's not secretive about it. The idea of like being able to make it, what I noticed is that I could actually turn it into like a baked oatmeal and have it like for an actual breakfast rather than just,
Oh, how would
yeah.
you go about doing that?
So I had found kind of a riffable formula of baked oats that I was making on repeat. And it had sugar, it had mashed banana in it, but it was like kind of a peanut butter style one. And so I was like, well, what if I just take out the peanut butter, use granulated sugar instead of brown sugar, add the coffee, just like these muffins, and the other interesting thing is that this recipe, it doesn't have any like vanilla and cinnamon, which I feel like all banana bread recipes and quick bread recipes have those things. This does not.
Yeah.
So I
Hmm.
always have to resist that urge to be like, this has vanilla and cinnamon in it, doesn't it? But it doesn't. But anyway, so I took all those hallmarks of this recipe and just formed it into the baked oatmeal recipe, and it worked fantastically. And it had that same kind of feel when
Mm.
I was eating it. And I think it was because of the espresso powder and the
Mhm.
water, like the adding the coffee in, and adding those dark, dark chocolate chunks, which is my favorite part of it.
I've never baked oatmeal.
No.
I was hesitant at first, but it from a meal prep perspective, it was nice. And then it was an odd halfway point between spoonable, almost like warm cereal oatmeal and a slice of cake for breakfast. It was like the middle point between those two things. And I was like, okay, I think I'm good with this. I think this is very enjoyable. So I just stuck with it.
I like the idea and I see it every so often. I've just never made it.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
some people do
Yeah.
they blend all the oats so that the oats are like they're basically using oat flour.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
You could do that, but I don't know. I like the chew of the
Mm.
oats. I like to leave them a little more whole, and then it feels more like a breakfast rather than just straight cake for breakfast.
And oats are
Oh.
something that if you can eat them, I think are so good to incorporate into your diet.
They got that valuable fiber.
Yeah, like for me, I'm trying to like lower the cholesterol, and that so I'm always thinking of these things like, oh, what are those things you can add in? But if you get tired of eating a bowl of oatmeal three times a
Yeah,
week, maybe you want something slightly different. I like this idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I like that it's changing the texture because like a oatmeal gets too repetitive. Like it's the same
Yeah,
like gruel almost all the time when you
it is.
like it gets kind of like after a while you're just like done with the oatmeal
Yes, or
in
like the
that
Oliver twist. Like, please, sir, I want
yeah,
some.
That
Yeah,
exactly.
just that just took me back to when I was in high school and university. I used to serve food at a seniors home, and we had these plastic bowls, and they would
Uh-huh.
fill them with this oatmeal. And then at the end of the meal, we did all the dishes, and so you'd have these bowls. If they didn't eat it, you just turn it upside down, and it would be this jelly sort of looks like a jellied
no.
oatmeal blob. It was like, ooh.
Yes.
Anyway.
And that I think, like to your point, like oats do have a ton of health benefits. And I think that is such a problem when our concept of health is like this boring, like gross thing. I think that's
Mhm.
so common. It holds a lot of people back from like trying to be a little healthier because they're like, well, if I start to work on this, my meals are going to be boring. My meals are going to have no variety. They're going to taste crappy. I can't have any sugar. Like there's all
Hmm.
this baggage that goes along with like, oh, I got to be healthy. And so to one, fit in muffins whenever you can. Like, put them in with a balanced breakfast, it's excellent. But like also to take the flavors of a fun recipe and
Hmm.
mix up your health conscious foods, your more nutritious foods with stuff that makes it taste nostalgic or fun or different or with a big variety. To me, it takes time, but it's time well spent to put that into your regular meals because it
Hmm.
makes I don't know, it makes your healthy meals more fun, makes life more fun if you're making that choice to stick to something more healthy on the 95% kind of ratio of time.
Okay, listener, if you're enjoying this conversation with our very special guest co host Megan Gaul from Partake Foodie, we really encourage you to go check her out on Instagram at partake_foodie. And she also has a website where all of her coaching and meal planning services can be found at partakemealplanning.com. And speaking of meal planning, stay tuned because we're about to get into it, and she just might convert me into a meal planner. How about you? Are you ready to become an expert meal planner? Let's find out. I sat in the other day on you do a weekly Instagram live where you help people walk through meal planning, which is something that I have had the best intentions to
Yeah.
do for my entire adult life is to ever since I learned that like this is a thing, people plan their meals for the week. I'm always like, yes, I need to do that. Have I ever actually done it? No. I fly by the seat of my pants every single freaking day. And this is like, and so I sat in and I was like learning so many things from just that short little period of time that I sat in watching you coach meal
Oh,
planning that I'm like, why am I not doing this?
it
Like,
has such a overcomplicated feel to it because like I don't know, I feel like my concept of meal planning was always like you have to have this menu, this 7-day calendar or 28-day calendar where every single meal is planned out. Like that was my impression. And they all have to be different and they all have
Mm.
like you have to chop things for every single one and put stuff
mm-hmm.
on the stove for every single one. So like but my impression is that like most people have done meal planning like for their household. It's just taking the extra step to be intentional about their own meals too. Is that where you feel like you were, Heather?
I don't know. I think it's just like,
Heather's a bad influence because I meal gonna throw her right under the bus.
Oh dear.
Gloves come
I
off.
meal planned for a long time when the kids were a bit younger. And like I knew what I was making for lunches, I knew what I was
Mhm.
doing at dinner. I had it all planned out. And Heather came in with her, lackadaisy,
Woo!
and it worked. And I was like, wow, she can do this and make food without
No,
all of
no, no,
this
no.
extra effort.
The thing is, it works here and there.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
odd time you're just sort of, you don't have something planned, you just kind of whip something
Mhm.
together,
Yeah.
and then you start feeling cocky because you did this and it worked, and everybody said, "Oh, this is so great." Like my husband will say, like, "How did you just pull this out of like
Where
I
did
didn't
this
think
come
I
from?
thought we had nothing in the house and here we have this meal." And I'm just like, "That's right. I did that." But you start to feel confident until you realize you can't do that every day.
Yes.
It's
And
it's a, you have
yeah.
an important skill though, like your fridge clearing skill.
Mm,
That is such a game changer when it comes to meal planning because you could actually put on your meal plan like fridge
mm.
clear day, like, and then you can do that to your heart's content.
Yeah.
I learned it from
See,
my mom. She called it fridge fallout. We'd say,
Ooh.
"What's
uh,
for dinner?" And she'd say, "Fridge fallout." We knew that was whatever was in the fridge was somehow becoming dinner. It would be like leftover this mixed with that and whatever. Like,
And somehow it would come
yeah.
together and be really good. Oh, I love that.
but you
Yeah.
can't do it every day. And as you have said, if you have a specific health concern or a goal that you're working towards that your diet is involved with, you
Hmm.
can't do that every
Yeah.
day. You do have to put some thought into it.
Yeah, and I think the fact that, Erin, you said like I was really on top of, especially when the kids are young. I think you're forced to like,
Mm,
and I'm not a mom, but a lot of my
mhm.
friends are moms. I coach some moms. I don't have the firsthand experience, but what I see from the outside is you're, of course, like you're responsible. You feel so responsible for the household, and you have so many tasks on your plate that you've got to be efficient there, and you're forced to do that. But I think the self is always like on the back burner for that. So, like you were saying, Heather,
Mhm.
when there is something you want to be really intentional about with your health, that is the piece that we're always winging. Like that's the piece
Mhm.
that's like, okay, I'll figure it out. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll figure it out tomorrow. And so that's to bring it back, Heather, to what you were saying is that's kind of what I like to do with my Thursday meal planning live class. It's remind everyone that like you're an important part of your household too. So let's
Mhm.
roughly get those foods that will work for you in your house. And let's just, use this little 30-minute time in the week to think ahead for yourself for future you and be like, what do you really want to eat this week? What's realistic? What have you done before that you like? Let's just put it down and make sure the foods are in the house. So I think it's against our nature to want to do that every week for ourselves because we're just used to doing everything else for the household. But I want people to take that time for themselves. So that's why I do it on every week.
I love that. And I was telling Erin after I had tuned into your live, I was like, there's this really great message here that Megan is teaching. Everybody else's preferences and needs are second nature to us. If you're that person in the house who plans the meals, you know the kid that won't eat the eggs, you know the one who's allergic to the
Mhm.
gluten, or like whatever the things are, they're just like ingrained. But
Mhm.
you don't always, especially if something's new. Like I was talking about my cholesterol, that's like a new development in my
Yeah.
midlife. And I'm like, I've never had to think about this before.
Yeah.
And so now it's like my first tendency is to want to kind of like pick a supplement. Like, is there a supplement that's going to like be the cure all? Because then I don't have to change anything in my diet, which is like more difficult. Or
Yeah.
maybe not more difficult, but you have to really be thinking about it.
Yeah, and I
And
think
uh-huh.
for folks who love cooking, that can also be really scary too, because it's like, well, now something that brings me a lot of fulfillment in my life has to change. Like, do I have to change? I can't do all the recipes I like to do. Like, that can bring up some like frustration and fear and resentment too. So I think bringing it back to the simplicity of, well, if I make more of my meals closer to what my goal is, that's going to be an improvement. I don't have to change everything at once. I will be
Mhm.
doing my job. I will be, treating myself just like I treat my child with intention, with love, with forethought,
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
that stuff. So it's easy to let it slide because it's us.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think if someone hasn't Like I didn't grow up cooking or being a very good cook at all. And so now I feel more comfortable cooking, which is why I feel like I can relax on my meal planning a little bit more. But I think it helps it be less overwhelming because when you have to walk in that kitchen every day and be like, oh my God, what's for dinner? You're not necessarily thinking of anybody's priorities other than how do I get food to
Mm-hmm.
feed, right?
Yeah.
You're not thinking about what do I need, what do they need? It's more just like, how do I put something on the table so that they eat or so
Hmm.
that we eat? And so I think by like starting out with meal planning and doing that 30 minutes of work gives your brain that like freedom so that when you walk in the kitchen, you know what you're doing. Like I would always write my lunches down that I would pack the kids because then I don't have to think in the morning. Like I can walk in bleary eyed with that coffee and just like stare at the fridge and be like, okay, cucumbers. Go get the cucumbers. Like I don't have to be like, what vegetable is going in your lunch today? What's the snack in your lunch today? Like it was all right there for me. And it gave your brain a break when you had to go in the kitchen.
Like for
Mm-hmm.
the fridge clearing skill is like it's almost like a creative like brainstorm. Like you have to be unstressed to be really good at it, I think. But I think most of us are not in that like free creative thinking space like 75 to 80 to 90% of the time. We're like stressed, we have worries, we have other people's priorities that are pressing on us. So I think to your point, like that 30 minutes of structure and just like let me get something easy down on paper can create more brain space later so that you don't have to rely on your creative juices when you're pretty sure they're going to run dry this week.
Yeah,
Not
it's
to say
true.
you can't do it, but you won't always be able to devote the energy to it.
Mm-hmm,
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you find that you have like go-to sources for recipes? How do you find what you put down on your meal plan? Is it like, do you Google? Do you use Pinterest? Do you have cookbooks you love? What
Ooh,
do
it's a mix. I think that at the beginning, me and my partner were really learning how to cook. So every Sunday, we would make a new batch meal. So he would make one batch meal, I would make one batch meal. We'd have lunches or maybe a few dinners for the week. The rest of the time, we were ordering takeout because we were new at this.
you?
Um, but that gave us a chance to explore a few easy ways of cooking. So we learned through the slow cooker first. That was really
Mm-hmm.
nice. We would use like 365 or the days of slow cooker meals or the official crock pot recipe, all the recipe book.
Hmm.
So the nice thing about those is that they kind of introduce you a bit to other techniques too. They'll like
Mm-hmm.
say, well, for this recipe, you got to brown the ground turkey first. For here, you have to make a roux on the stove first. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so as we kind of built up a few techniques, then it became easier to build up that list of go-tos. And I think we also got confident enough to try different sources of recipes. So I got really into the New York Times cooking column and was constantly looking for things there because I just felt I could really rely on them. You can really look at those comments and judge how the recipe is going to be.
Hmm.
Right.
So that was fun. But then both of us have lost a significant amount of weight and have been maintaining it. And so the other places we looked were places that were fairly calorie conscious and had us using more whole foods than we were used to. So we looked at
Mm-hmm.
skinnytaste.com and this fitness person named Kevin Curry who has this meal prep book called Fit Men Cook. So we were just looking for things that were using less oil and more whole foods, and that gave us more confidence too. But I think now that we've practiced so much and feel really confident in the kitchen, we have a few go-tos that are very, very easy. So we'll have just like a turkey burgers and a side salad. We do a lot of cabbage slaws because cabbage is such a hearty vegetable. It lasts forever in the fridge, and you can endlessly riff on the dressings and the things that you add into it. We stock the freezer with the proteins that we know how to cook, and then we have a lot of like pre-cooked proteins too. So I think we just kind of have built up a nice list of go-to meals. And if we have a week where we have more creative juices, we'll try a new recipe.
I think
Hmm.
it's really important to remember that it takes time. Like
Yes.
all of these things, like you don't just become a good cook or a creative cook or
A meal planner.
a meal planner. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to
Yeah.
Yeah.
practice up at it. You have to and start slow so you don't feel so discouraged right away, jumping into like, I'm going to make a Julia Child recipe or
Oh,
something
yeah.
ridiculous, right? Where you're like, don't do that to yourself.
It
Mhm.
totally scares people off from learning the skills, and getting
Yeah.
to that point eventually. Like you will get to that point, but put in your time first and make it easy on yourself first. Because like you said, it definitely takes time.
Mhm.
Um, and I was just looking at our grocery cart this past weekend, and I was like, look at how many vegetables are in this cart. Which is like giving us a little like, I don't know, self-love in my mind. I'm like, we are so good. We're so happy. But all those vegetables take time to cut, to store, to make sure that you use them before they go bad. And I
Mhm.
couldn't have done that at the very beginning. I really needed
Mhm.
simple things that used up everything I was gonna buy so that I
Yeah.
wasn't worrying with that half empty carton of heavy cream or the, half a head of cabbage in the fridge. I needed those simple recipes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
then eventually you get to the point where you can take your favorite muffin recipe and riff on it and make a baked oatmeal that gives you that same good feeling because
Yeah.
you recognize how you can adapt and change something. So it's like
Yeah,
that's like
Mhm.
goals right
Yeah.
there. That's like home cooked.
totally.
Hmm. And I
Mhm.
think for me, like if I were, I shouldn't say if, when I get to like meal planning and like get going
That's
with
the
it.
spirit.
Yeah, see, it's all in the mindset, right? No,
Mhm. Mhm.
maybe the thing, pick the meal that you struggle with. Like if dinner is like the stressful time of day and the stressful thing, maybe if I focus on like just planning my dinners. Breakfast is kind of a free for all. I'm like, eat what you want. I'm not making you breakfast unless it's the weekend and we're lazy and we want to make brunch sometimes. But
Mhm.
dinner is like the stressful thing. Maybe just start it with planning that one meal. And then you're only planning seven in a week instead of like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah. So when you write a plan, do you then write a grocery list that comes out of that plan?
Yeah, I don't do it right away. I just do it before I go to the store. But having the plan makes the grocery list take like 2 seconds. It's a very nice thing. Like it allows you to just have everything in one place. The only time you would need to really look into one recipe further is if it's a new one that you have not used before. And I don't recommend putting more than one of those per week. Like
Mhm.
Mm,
it
good
just
I
point.
agree. I
yeah,
agree.
especially when we're on a new kind of diet or a new way of eating that we've never done before. Instead of meal planning the stuff we already know, we tend to like recipe search and over research and fill the meal plan with like brand new things that we've never done before. And then you're looking down a week of stuff you've never made for your household before. And that is not a fun place to be. It takes time, it takes energy, it's
Yeah.
unrealistic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't always know how it's going to go over. If it's something new, are they going to like it? Are we going to end up with a bunch of leftovers nobody wants?
Yeah, exactly.
Too much new is hard to adapt to, I think for anybody. Even
Mhm.
adults. Like, yes, we know our kids will be like, "What's this? I've never seen this before." But like even ourselves, I
Mhm.
find if I have too many things that I'm like, "Oh, this is different. This is new." I'm like, too much."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need
Or
time to adapt.
you got to kind of, you do, like I do kind of plan. It's just in my head. It's just not as effective.
Yes. Yes. So you're doing the work, but then you're keeping it up in your head where
Yeah.
all the other stuff is jumbling around too, which is it's hard on us. It really is.
Yes, it's
It
true.
fills up
And
space and keeps less
yeah.
available for all the other
And if there's
things.
something repetitive that we do, we should just write it down and let the paper take care of that and not expect our brains to have to hold it all.
Mhm.
Mhm. So do you do all your meal planning on paper?
So I keep a go-to list on a spreadsheet, but I do actually physically write out the rough menu and then just
Mm.
kind of stick them on the fridge. And then before we go to the grocery store over the weekend, I'll use that to write out my list. The next level is kind of keeping those go-to meals somewhere. Some people use like index cards. They'll write down their family's favorite meals on index cards and just kind of shuffle through them or ask their kids to pick the dinners for the week. And some people will keep a spreadsheet like me. But whatever works for you, as long as it's all in one place, it's really helpful.
Yeah. I think that's part of the challenge.
Make it
Yeah.
easy on yourself. Make it
Yeah.
accessible. Put it in a format that you like to use.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And don't be annoyed if you have to kind of redo it at some point. Because, like, I bet we've all kept our lists at different places at different points in our lives. Like, and also as technology changes too.
Right. Yeah, I'm a little bit haphazard these days, so I definitely have to kind of like get myself back into a better routine. So this is gonna inspire me to do that. Gonna do it.
No, I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. This has been so great. When you think about how the recipe that you sent to us, so simple, muffins. Most people have probably baked muffins at some point. It's like, what can they possibly talk about for an hour with a muffin recipe? Well, let
We
me
found
tell you, we can talk all day long about this stuff. I think it's just
Yeah.
so fun. Why don't you, Megan, please remind our listener where to find you and follow you and learn all the things that you have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. I have information about my coaching, my free meal planning classes, all there. And my handle is partake_foodie.
Nice.
Okay.
And we will link it in the show notes as well. So if you want to find Megan, just scroll down and there she'll be. Highly recommend. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got such great, just practical tips and just a lot of like, I feel like what you're helping people understand is to give themselves some grace.
Be nice to yourself.
Don't be hard on yourself. You have this goal, whether it's weight loss or a health, like me and my cholesterol, whatever it is. It's like, just, to give yourself a little bit of grace to ease into it and to figure it out and to be okay. It'll be
Yeah,
okay.
I love how you put that. Yeah, just give yourself the consideration that you give to so many others in your life. I think we don't give ourselves enough of that. So if I can, if I can help people do that every Thursday, then I will.
You are doing that for sure.
Thank
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me. I don't know, I loved your idea of just, using a recipe to jump off from a conversation. So thank you for giving my mom's banana recipe a try. I'm so glad to share that with other people because I love them so much.
Oh, we loved it.
Oh, I got some frozen bananas that are just calling me now.
So good.
And now for the fine print. For links to recipes and many other random things we talked about in this episode, check out the show notes or our website, www.threekitchenspodcast.com. Join us over on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and TikTok to see what we're cooking up next. And if you love the show, tell a friend. Word of mouth is the #1 way people learn about new podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep.
It can sometimes be a little bit wild when the rest of the family's home.